Good morning, good afternoon, good evening guys, gals and gentlebods, and welcome back to the shed. We are in the shed, so it's the second part of reworking the cylinder head. Well, it's the second part of the cylinder head work. This is the first part of reworking it. First part was measuring the existing airflow. So without further ado, I'll reposition the camera and show you what I'm at. Right, so if you remember in the previous video where I flow tested this head, I checked that the manifold gasket is a good match to the exhaust manifold, and it is, whereas the ports in the cylinder head itself are quite small, quite a bit smaller than that port, so it creates a step where the cross-sectional area of the exhaust changes quite dramatically very quickly. What that will do is allow the exhaust gases to expand rapidly to within the confines of the manifold tubes, which may or may not be detrimental. Two-stroke bikes often use expansion chambers to help create vacuum to suck the flow through. I'm not entirely sure that works as well on a four-stroke. So what I've done, if I just reposition that head for you so you can see what's what. So I've made a start on this one and I've cut away the excess material, so that port is now going to match quite nicely to the exhaust manifold. It just takes away that step. Now, according to Mr. Vizard's book, the actual area of flow through these ports is in this top left quarter, the outer quarter, because the direction of flow is actually angular, so it's coming out, it's going in that direction from the cylinder and upwards. It tends to concentrate in that upper quarter, and conversely on the other end of the cylinder head it goes the opposite direction, but it's that upper outer quarter of the manifold of the port that does most of the flow. So this, in theory, according to Mr. Vizard, this work will achieve absolutely nothing for flow, but it works in my mind. Right, so this is the equipment I'm using. I've got a die grinder mounted in a bench vise, for want of a better description of it. I suppose that's what it is, with a flexible drive, and on the end I've got a grinding bit in the end of the holder. Got a vacuum cleaner connected up. When I switch that on, the vacuum cleaner switches on, and I've got the vacuum cleaner set up on the cylinder head to catch the debris, like so. So that will suck the dust up, because you don't really want to be breathing grinding dust. It's quite a noisy operation, because obviously I've got the noise of the die grinder and the vacuum cleaner running at the same time. So I'm pretty happy with that one, how that's turned out. So I'll have a go at the other one. Now this is going to be a long and drawn out process doing this head. That little bit of work that I've done on that port adds up to most of an hour. So, and that's the easy bit. That and that and that, they're the easy bits. Actually reshaping the ports inside is the real time consuming bit. So this video will be shot over several days, and so don't be surprised if what I'm wearing changes or my haircut changes or whatever. Right, let's get at it. I think we'll make a start on number 2. So I've got some earplugs because it's noisy, so I'll pop them in. Oh yes, one other little detail that I nearly forgot to mention. When you're doing these, you've got the push rod holes to account for. That's a push rod hole. So it would be easy when grinding that out to go too far and break through into the push rod hole, and obviously that wouldn't be good because then we'd be pumping exhaust gases into the crankcase effectively. Likewise, the other push rod is very close to the inlet port on both sides, so it's very important that we don't take too much metal out of that area and break through into the push rod tubes. Right, we'll get started. We'll have a go at that one. Right, that's the middle port done, or started at least. That's actually gone a lot faster. That's about half an hour it's taken me to do that one. If I just zoom in a bit, you can see that that now much more closely follows the shape, and on this one it will make a difference, because whereas the outer two, so cylinder 1, this area carries most of the flow, and on 4 this area carries most of the flow, because this port deals with the exhaust from cylinders 2 and 3. So from cylinder 2 it will be biased to this side, this quarter, and on cylinder 3 it will be biased to this quarter. So opening that out to meet the exhaust manifold better will make a difference. Right, on to the next one. And as you can see, there's quite a lot of material to take out of there. So I'm using a combination of the grinder. If I just zoom out, and some of it I'm doing with the finger grinder. When I'm using that, obviously I can't go straight into there because it's too big. I can use it that way because that distance is less than the height of the port, so I can use it that way, but I'm using the top side so that it's pushing the material that it takes off, it's pushing down into the port, and the vacuum cleaner can pick it up. So I'll make a start on doing this one, and then we'll see how we go. Right, so that's 3 exhaust port outlets done. Quite pleased with that. That's matching quite nicely. Take my earplugs out. There is going to be some work to do in the inlet ports, but it's not major. There's a little bit of a change of profile from almost rectangular to circular. That just needs a bit of blending. The major part of the work is down in the port from the combustion chamber side, so down in here. So on the exhaust ports, I don't know whether you can see that, probably not, there's quite a large boss around the valve guide which floats down the cross-sectional area quite a lot. There's also quite a sharp step on the what they call the short side. So if you think of the gas flow, initially is going that way and then it's got to turn basically 90 degrees and go that way. So you've got the short side and the long side. The short side has got quite a pronounced step, quite a sharp change of direction, which isn't good because what we get is laminar flow. What I need is to do a quick sketch. One moment please. Right, so that's basically the port looking in cross section. So there's the valve seat area. This is the boss with the valve guide in it, and this is the face that the manifold joins to. So as you can see, the long side has got a long gentle curve. That's great because airflow in a port or pipe, we have what's called wall attachment or laminar flow, and what will happen is some of the air that's flowing, the air closest to this wall will attach to it and will go slightly slower. Then the next layer, lamination, laminar, will be moving faster, and by the time you get to the middle of the port it will be moving faster still. Now you've also got the change of direction, so as the airflow goes that way round the valve and into the port, it wants to continue in that direction. It is forced to change direction by the port, so it will tend to go to the top of the port. But that sharp step there stops the laminar flow because the air attaches initially, but then as it gets to there it comes straight off and it just goes into turbulence. So what we need to do is blend that out so that it's a smoother form and the air can attach and stay with it, and that will help to use more of the port cross-sectional area. A lot of this needs to go. Obviously we can't take it all away because there's the valve guide in there, but from looking at Vizard's book I would say we can certainly come down to that sort of profile, which will open up the throat. If we consider that to be the throat, the narrowest part, it'll open that up considerably. So that's the basics of it. I am not an expert in this stuff. Never done this. Well, I have done some light porting work on cylinder heads before, but I've never done an A series, and they are peculiar because of the Siamese system. So that's the plan. We'll get on with it. Right, so that's the exhaust ports done. Well, the manifold end of the exhaust ports at least. So now I want to turn my attention to the inlet ports, the manifold face. There's not a lot of work needs doing on these. So now I want to have a go at the inlet ports, the manifold face. There's not a massive amount of work to do in these, but you may just be able to see, if I can get the light in the right position for you. It's a bit of an awkward shot actually. You may be able to just see there, the port goes from circular to vaguely rectangular, and it's not terrible. There's just a few slightly sharper edges that want blending out, so that's what I'm going to do next. Right, that's the manifold end of the inlet ports cleaned up. Like I said, not a massive amount of work required. The transition from the almost rectangular port to the circle was a little bit abrupt, so there was a bit of an edge to it like that. So all I've done is just blended that out so that it's got a smoother flow. Right, so the next step will be to turn the head on its back, as it were, and then do some work in the actual ports themselves. Right, so we've got a bit further on. I'll just show you down into, that's the exhaust port of number 1 cylinder. So you can see how I've managed to cut away the boss around the valve guide. Now normally you'd take the valve guides out and put new valve guides in, but these valve guides are in very good condition. They've only done a few thousand miles in actual fact, according to the history of the vehicle. So I don't really want to disturb them and go to the expense of putting new valve guides in. So I've done what I can to cut away the boss around it, and as you can see, it's opened that up a lot, and the short side curve, short side bend there is blended out, so that's a lot smoother. I've done a lot of the work with this. It's a tungsten carbide long series bit in a flexible drive unit powered by the die grinder. So if I just give you a look into number 4 exhaust port, which is the one that closest resembles number 1. So there you should still be able to see the boss around the valve guide and how sharp, let me see if I can get a bit more light on that for you. See how sharp that short side turn is. Not even a turn, it's just a step. So if you compare that to that, I think that is going to flow a lot better. So I'll crack on. That's one port almost finished. So it's a long-winded and time-consuming process. Alright, so that's the cylinder head largely complete, porting wise. If you can see down into there, maybe if I shine the light in there, so there's one. There's the inlet port. So I've removed those steps that were in the back edge where the holes had been machined out, and there's the centre exhaust ports from 2 and 3. Number 3 inlet, number 4 inlet and 4 exhaust. So they're all pretty much complete. There's a bit of final detailing, not really a lot more I want to do on them. The next step is to establish the compression ratio. Now to do that I need to check the clearance of the top of the pistons to the top of the block when they're assembled. Because compression ratio is calculated by swept volume plus clearance volume divided by clearance volume. Swept volume is simply bore times stroke, cross-sectional area of the bore times the stroke, so that's easy to calculate. The clearance volume is a little more complex because the clearance volume includes that volume of the combustion chamber in the head plus the volume of the thickness of the cylinder head gasket plus any dish or clearance between the top of the pistons and the block and the clearance around the sides of the piston down to the ring gland. So I need to do some calculations, but first of all I need to measure the piston top to deck clearance, and then I can measure this and calculate the compression ratio. I'm ideally looking for somewhere around 10 to 1. Could go higher, but I don't think it's really necessary. I think 10:1 is a safe level to go to for a moderately improved engine. I'm not looking for a full race setup. So there we go, that's about it for the cylinder head. So there's a little bit of cleaning up work to do, nothing major. I've covered the main aspects of it. The next step will be to calculate the compression ratio, and as I said, to do that I need to assemble the piston on the rod, get the crank in the block, get it all assembled with the bearings, and measure the piston to deck clearance so that I can calculate the compression ratio accurately. So the next step of the process will be lightening and balancing the rods, but I think that's another video in itself, so we'll call it a day at that for this one. Hope you found this interesting, maybe helpful if you're doing a similar sort of job, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.